On June 29th, we have the full moon at 8 degrees of Capricorn. This moon is ruled by Saturn. Saturn is sitting in a square to this moon at 14 degrees of Aries. It's interesting, this moon, it's already experienced the square to Neptune. So it's experienced fogginess, illusions, delusions, deceptions, maybe feelings of ecstasy as well. Could be an idealistic place and escapism, potentially. So it experienced these feelings already, and now it's moving to the square to Saturn. It's moving, approaching a square to Saturn. So this moon is also in detriment in the sign of Capricorn. It doesn't like to be there. Saturn is also in detriment in the sign of Aries. It doesn't like to be there either. So both of these planets are uncomfortable where they are. And the moon is also out of bounds in its subconscious, kind of subconsciously driven. So moving based on emotion. In Capricorn, wanting to restrict the emotions of the moon. The moon is also conjunct fixed star Facies. Facies has a Sun-Mars nature, so can be violent, can experience losses, overreaction, which definitely with the moon and emotion in this place can overreact. Mercury is also stationed retrograde, so thinking about how we express those emotions through our words, through our speech. Remember that Mercury is sitting retrograde. So we're reevaluating how emotional we're speaking. Maybe too much emotion doesn't necessarily get the point across in a clear way. So we're restructuring how we speak here, and even discussing Cancer themes of the past and emotional security, the home, the land, our traditions, how we nurture, how we connect. Facies will also bring in a fearlessness. It's leadership and warlike abilities. Also, possible chronic mystery illnesses for someone who might have a placement here. Could be someone who's driven and focused, outspoken, a groundbreaking kind of personality, a prolific person, productive and profound. But also in your face. You know, they're gritty and they're dark, and there's a psychological edge, a probing, the gaze, you know, known for the gaze. It's a probing, a penetrating stare. And this person maybe has interest in religion and philosophy, politics, literature, film, publishing. And also a person who just never gives up, you know, and maybe if it doesn't appear violent, it shows itself through words and images and symbolism instead. So it's a very kind of volatile fixed star, someone who doesn't back down and outspoken. It's interesting that Moon is also conjunct the asteroid Zion. And the Zion myth, it's a man, he was a king, right? And he eliminated his father-in-law in order to avoid paying the bride price. And he also tried to seduce Hera, which Jupiter did not like. You know, he came to Jupiter's home and tried to seduce Hera. You know, how dare you? And so he represents kind of going against tradition. Even Hera is associated with traditions. And traditions, it's interesting. That's the Cancer Capricorn axis that we have here with the sun and moon, the full moon. So this is represented by Hera, the traditions, standards, And Zion is going against those traditions by avoiding the bride price, by seducing Hera, the goddess of traditions. Also, Jupiter. It's interesting because the moon is conjunct Zion, right? And it was also squared Neptune right before this full moon became exact. It's squared Neptune, so that involves Zion receiving a deception through Neptune, and he was deceived through Jupiter, through Zeus. He was deceived. He tried to seduce Hera, but Zeus transformed a cloud into the shape of Hera and to fool him. And he still made love to the cloud, and he became the father of all the centaurs. And he was also punished, right? He became the father of the centaurs, but he was punished by Zeus. He was attached to a fiery wheel that continued to spin until the end of time. And some say that the wheel was within the underworld, so he just continued to spin. And that's the end of him. So that's punishment too, and punishment is Saturn. So it can be that we have people speaking out and maybe speaking out of pockets, saying things, maybe not verifying the information, maybe being deceived by some information, not double checking, and then finding out later that, oops, you spoke too soon, maybe you have said something you shouldn't have said. And then the punishment comes as the moon starts to perfect that square to Saturn. There's a T-square happening between the Sun, Moon, and Neptune as well happening here. The T-square can act as the solution, but maybe even a point of tension for this opposition between the Sun and the Moon here, between Capricorn and Cancer. This dynamic when it comes to privacy and public visibility, public image, career, and home. Home obligations, career obligations, commitments, but traditions. Neptune can act as a key to resolving whatever problem there is. Maybe this person speaks out because there's tension between home and work. And maybe what's needed is Neptune, which is compassion and forgiveness for the individual Aries. So Neptune can act as a key to solving whatever problem this is. There's also, too, the 4 to 8 degrees of Libra, which can be, if you have a placement here, it can be a bit of a discharge point for the tension as well between this placement, where you can release some of that tension there. Also, it's happening in cardinal signs. So all of these signs, they want to move the needle. It's a catalyst for change. They turn the wheel. So they're impatient, they're insistent on moving forward. And this can lead to some hasty decision making and even some head-on collisions, confrontations with other people. Sun is also conjunct Mirzam, the announcer. So this person wants to speak. This is the time we want to speak, but the Mercury is also conjunct Jupiter at 20. Jupiter's at 29 degrees. It's about to leave Cancer. So this is a big moment. A lot of speech and speaking loudly, emotionally. Maybe even too much. Maybe saying things that we'll regret later. That maybe we'll come back and face the punishment of that Saturn later on for what we've said, or maybe just maybe being deceived by something and moving forward on emotion, and maybe finding out later. Sometimes when we are restricted, sometimes when we are restricted, the expression that comes out is more charged than it was intended to be in the beginning. There's Hopi conjunct the sun also. Maybe look at the Hopi prophecy and find some way to unite. There's also a lot of whistle blowing, right? Whistle blowing potentially, and I wonder how it plays out as Mercury is retrograde here. You know, maybe the information is not totally correct, or we find out later more information that changes things. Can be a ruthless expression of self here. But you know what, also, sometimes these expressions are necessary to move past something. I notice too if sometimes Jupiter is sitting at 29 degrees too. You know, sometimes he's strong and he will force you to question yourself. You know, why do you believe that? Or that's not a belief that is appropriate. And because you deem it not appropriate, you don't release that emotion. The emotion, it never gets expressed and it just sits within you. It finds a place of residence and it starts to impact your behavior and the way that you move your mental atmosphere. So sometimes these things, they do have to be released just so we can hear them out loud. You know, when you hear the words out loud, sometimes that's the moment that you question yourself and say, wow, okay, that's not right, or I should work on this. Sometimes keeping it in, it's not helping. It doesn't help to move the situation. It just remains stagnant and stuck. So perhaps this is an opportunity to release emotions that are maybe ugly, but need to be released, so that we can then look at ourselves clearly, more clearly. Thanks for listening. Bye.